There are stories that shake your soul, and there are voices that carry the weight of 1,000 fallen brothers. In this episode of Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel, we sit with a man who walked through hell with a broken heart, a machine gun in hand, and a quiet prayer on his lips. His journey began in hardship, to facing the enemy and carrying the wounded through a battlefield that never seemed to end. He saw the worst of war and the worst of what war can do to a man afterward. But through it all, through pain, through guilt, he found something that brought him back to life, the reason to keep going. This is not just a war story. This is a story of redemption, a story of purpose, and a voice for those still trapped in the jungle of memory. This is Diana Mall Halstead, the Kriege's daughter, and today you will meet a true American legend. Robert, welcome to the Barbed Wire Hotel.
Thank you, ma'am.
Before we get into more detail, where did you grow up?
All over the place. My daddy worked in a cotton mill. I was about 13 years old, and mom and daddy separated. There was three boys. One was older than me, and one was younger than me. When she left, she took the younger one with her and left us to do for ourselves. So we stayed with daddy, and there was different things, going to school and trying to get clothes washed in the wintertime. It was cold. We didn't have any fuel. We didn't have enough blankets for us all. Back then we had mattresses. We didn't have any box springs. And we had two on the bed and had springs underneath. It got so cold, I crawled in between the two mattresses to stay warm. About 16, and I was still in school, but a job came open at a cotton mill. It didn't take very long going to school and work. Something had to go. And therefore, I quit school. I was 35 years old before I ever finished high school. We moved from Whiteville, North Carolina, to Lexington. I went to work at Winona Cotton Mill. I was working there about a year, and this girl came to work there at Winona, and I sort of got sweet on her. One night, a fella came up and told me that her husband, I didn't know she was married, was waiting outside the gate with a shotgun. So I went out the back gate and got in my car. The next morning, I was at the recruiter's office. That afternoon, I was in Charlotte taking my physical. The orders came to report to Fort Gordon, Georgia for basic training. There I went to Korea. Getting into Vietnam, I had a little priority as far as training over the younger fellows that was there.
When did you go to Korea?
1964. I was in Korea for 13 months. I made rank real fast. I got to E5 like that. You asked the question on what caused me to decide to go in the Army. I didn't choose anything. Didn't nobody tell me I could choose. Walking around, I was the youngest buck sergeant in Fort Hood, Texas, and that made me a little proud. So I re-enlisted. Didn't know what was down the road. I re-enlisted for airborne. All of a sudden, I was hearing about Vietnam and the 1st Cavalry Division. The 1st Cavalry Division was formed in Fort Benning, and I went over to Vietnam with the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, and that was General Custer's old outfit. From there, they started sending different things over to us. They got an old saying, it's that horse has never been rode, the line that's never been crossed, and yellow was the reason why. Wasn't nothing to that, because what they formed in Fort Benning, Georgia in 1963, they sent the best that the United States had to offer. We had the best. And Bruce Crandall, the Snake's what they called him, chose me for his door gunner, which he got the first. I was the first door gunner in Vietnam. The first major battle that took place was the Drang Valley, an LZX raid. We went out one night just before the Drang Valley. The pilot got vertigo. I'm sitting back there at night. We had doors on the helicopter, but they stayed open. And I felt the wind hitting me hard on the right-hand side. It was strange that the wind was hitting me that hard. And I looked out to my right, and it looked like the outline of a mountain through the dark. And I looked back up to the pilot, and he was flipping buttons overhead. We were not going just forward, we were going to the flank. And I looked back out the door, and it wasn't the outline of a mountain, it was the outline of the trees. And we were going in them. Limbs started going every which way. Well, it had my whole door blocked. There was sparks flying every which way. I butted the trees down with my head getting out of there because I'd seen those things explode when they'd hit, and I didn't want to be around any explosion like that. The next morning in formation, captain called for the pilot. The pilot answered him. Said he called for the crew chief. And the crew chief answered him. He said he called for the gunner. He didn't hear nothing. So he said he screamed out as loud as he could for the gunner. He said, way over on another hill over there, I heard somebody saying, yeah, screaming back. I got away from that thing. I got out of it, got through those tree limbs, and I was gone. It might be JP4 fuel, but it'd make a heck of an explosion. Going on from there, fellow you'll be interviewing, Francisco Marino. There's a story called LV Monkey, where we had to land on top of another helicopter. They had crashed and was laying over to the side, so we had to land on top of it, and that's the reason we called it LV Monkey. We had it with one skid on the helicopter and another skid on the bank to keep us upright. I'm leading up to November 14th, 1965. We had a call making an assault on what you call the Fuchon Mountain, and we didn't know how many was out there. Had no idea. We were about 60% strength on our side, which was about 450 men. And come to find out, we were heading into 1,700. And this was not black pajamas and straw hats. This was a regular North Vietnamese army. We made the initial assault, which these things were timed perfectly. When the last artillery round hit, we were going in, and we made the assault. There was just smoke and dust everywhere. You couldn't see from one tree to another tree, and everybody jumping off the helicopters there and firing. It was a big deal, but we didn't get one shot back at us. We went back to Play Me Special Forces Camp and picked up another load to take in. In doing so, come back in on the second load, there was no firing going on. The third, no firing going on. And on the fourth, no firing going on. On the fifth lift, it was about 15 or 20 minutes from Fuchon Mountain to Play Me Special Forces Camp. It took about 20 minutes to pick up another load and take in there. So you got close to an hour time you started. That gave the North Vietnamese time to get organized with 1,700 soldiers. On the fifth lift, we had about 140 Cav soldiers on the ground. As we were going in, I seen somebody out in the field waving his arms like that. You know, I didn't know what it meant, and I don't guess the pilot did either. We had other helicopters in behind us, and we had to land. He said there's fire in the LZ, but it's friendly fire. As we started going in, over the intercom, it sounded like fish frying in a pan and the grease popped. I could see things going across my face. Some people say you can't see a bullet when it comes across your face. There was tracer rounds, and they were very easy to see. And they were flying in front of my face, and I felt something hit my right hand. I thought maybe it might have been a bug flew in. And I looked down and I seen blood, but it still didn't dawn on me because it was friendly fire. And all of a sudden I heard a snap like a bullwhip, and the RTO was sitting beside of me. And when I heard the snap, I turned around and blood was squirting out of his right cheekbone. He fell over on me with his helmet turned to the side, and all the blood was squirting out and going back down into the helmet. Well, there was a captain seated beside of him. He looked at him and then jumped out. And there was a second lieutenant seated beside of him, did a back bend and hit the ground. Just men laying out there like chickens with their heads cut off, flopping around. And you could actually look out there then and see the North Vietnamese behind trees and just all over the place. There were so many of them. They were outnumbered 7-1. And they had all the same equipment that we had. They had machine guns. They had camouflage fatigues, steel pots. It was a regular North Vietnamese army. And the crew chief, everything was going on the left-hand side, and I was on the right and could not turn my gun around and shoot through the helicopter. I was screaming at him to fire back, and he was sitting there in his seat with his chin down in his neck like that. And I looked and I seen blood coming out the side of his neck. So there was a first aid kit behind the pilot's seat. You know, I'm trying to figure this out. How am I going to put a tourniquet around somebody's neck without choking them to death? And I had to figure it out as I went. What it is a packet about 6 inches long, about 3 inches wide, and had long gauze tails on it. So I put the packet up against his neck and took his hand, tied a knot, and stuck this arm through there to hold it against it. But when I did that, blood started coming out the other side. So I had to repeat the same thing, put the patch over here and put his arm through there to hold it on. They said that I saved his life. I don't know. That's the way he went to the aid station. All flights were called off. Hal Moore said, don't send any more helicopters in. Don't send any more men in because the helicopters were being targeted. We went back to Play Me, and we were waiting out there for somebody to tell us to bring the rest of the guys in. Hal called and said he needed emergency ammunition, medical supplies, and water. Ed Freeman, pilot of number 2 helicopter, volunteered. His whole crew did. Angel Kumba was his door gunner, and Bruce Crandall was number 1 helicopter. So we all volunteered and went back in, and this is where it starts. It's one of them things where we were talking prior that my young life determined what I was going to be. No, it didn't. And I'm fixing to walk as best I can, walk you through what happened. We had 2 medevac helicopters that were going to take the supplies in, and they were going to come in and pick up the wounded. As we went in, the 2 medevacs started getting fired on, and so they aborted. They just took off. So that left us bringing ammunition in, medical supplies, water. Then it left us to do the rescue. And for about 13 hours that we did rescue. At that time, we'd sent the rest of the guys in. Of the 450, the original 140 some that we'd sent in, over half of them were wounded or dead. We had to do the rescue. Well, I can't understand it. I don't know what happened. I had to unload the ammunition, and we were there in the very middle of what was going on. You could see guys out there trying to crawl to the helicopters. Well, what was I to do? We were the only ones there to dig them out. So I'd leave my helicopter and run out and pick them up. Some, if they were over 200 pounds, I throw them over my shoulder. Others we dragged by the feet, and others that been hitting the leg and had one leg they could walk on. We sort of grabbed them, tried to help them back to the helicopter. And by the time you got him to the helicopter, got him laid down in the floor, you look back and there's 4 or 5 more trying to make it back to the helicopter. Well, you go on and you do what you got to do. Nobody else to do it. Every time you turn around, there was more out there. You asked me why I did what I did. I don't know. You try to pick somebody up with his guts hanging out, trying to push the guts back in and rake the leaves and the dirt off of it. There's nobody else to do it. But it's kept right on. Something happened. I knew I wasn't going to make it out of that. But somehow or another, I had made an agreement with myself. I know I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to do all I can to get these guys back. Well, Kumba on the other ship, they were right beside us, and he was doing the same thing. There was one case, he'd come across a stretcher with wooden handles, and him and his crew chief jumped off the helicopter, run out with the stretcher. And they got one fella and got him on there and got him back to the ship. Well, then the stretcher was no good because they looked and there were 20 bullet holes in the stretcher and couldn't be used anymore because the wooden handles were chewed up with bullets. Every time we went back in there, there was more out there. So we unload the ammunition, jump out, run out where they were at, right in the middle of it. I don't know how in the world they kept missing me. I'd made an agreement with myself, that I don't care any longer, I'm gonna die. So I thought I was a dead man anyway. But they kept missing. And like I say, with a 200-pound man on your back, you can't run very fast. This is something that the movie don't show. They asked me on Reach Across America out of Maine about the realness of what was going on. I told him, I said, look, you can't make it real. I said, you make all the movies you want. And here's the part that's going to be hard for me to tell you. What are you going to do when you hear screaming and crying? And yes, I really heard boys calling for mama. You can't sit there. You can't wait. You got to do everything you can do. I don't think I was any braver than anybody else, but I just made an agreement with myself. I'm going to get all that I can while I can before I'm dead. This went on and on and on and on till it got dark. We started off about 10 o'clock that morning and started getting dark, so everybody flew back into Playcoon, which was the base camp. Well, Crandall couldn't find him. He was my pilot. About 10:30 that night, I was just outside my little pup tent there, smoking cigarettes, and I'm thinking about them boys out there still going through this. And a call came in from Hal Moore in the Drang, or LZ X-ray, that he needed emergency resupplies like now. Gunner from another helicopter came by and told me, he said, Beckom, they need us down at operation. So I went down there, and there was a Captain Gilson. He was number 3. Crandall was number 1, Freeman number 2, and Gilson was number 3 in leadership. He said, Beckom, we got to make a flight back into the LZ. And so we went to another place, but we had to turn off all light. There was no moon, no stars, no nothing. I honestly tried to hold my hand up in front of my face, see if I could see my hand. I couldn't even see it. But we had no lights at all. And trying to make a landing. Well, we landed by a Pathfinder's flashlight. We got the supplies off and took in several wounded. Trying to get out of there was something else. A helicopter, when it takes off, the nose goes down, and you got to get forward airspeed before you can go up. Can't see a tree, don't know where they're at. We know they're there somewhere. You can't say enough about the pilot. They were absolutely great, and they did the impossible. We finally got out of there and made it back. I've got affidavits from different people, and one from Gilson, the pilot, as to what took place there. The rest of the year, we did different things, which was breathtaking, to say the least, but nothing like that. That changed me. I'd never been in a fight. Wouldn't know what it was to hit somebody upside the head. It changed me because I was wanting to kill them. I fired the M60 machine gun. I think it fired about 620 rounds per minute. And I just do figure eights, so it was mounted on the side of the helicopter. And the only kind of relief that I would get would be when I was pulling that trigger. It made me feel like I had a wall in front of me. There just so many things took place there, but nothing like the Drang Valley. As soon as Hal Moore left out 3 days later, they sent another colonel in with the 2nd of the 7th Company that I went over with, but I had left them to be a door gunner. Matter of fact, my whole platoon got wiped out right there. A little Puerto Rican E4 took my place as squad leader. We were flying trying to locate them because they had got cut off. They got hit in the front, the back, each side. I knew what to do. I was trained for that in Korea. You hit in the front, you hit in the back, hit on the side. Well, then you got a split second to determine where the most fire's coming from. And you take him in and you head toward that. You charge that, the weakest point. And so we were throwing smoke bombs out to see if we could get to them because we couldn't find them. And the last call that we got was, I see you smoke, but we can't get to you. Then radio silence. And when we did pick up the Puerto Rican, he was laying there, he fired every round he had. And they had cut up that boy's head with a machete where you just see little blocks like a skull. The old person that I was, he's dead. I was getting into everything that I could. I wanted somebody to kill me. That made me what I was. I wasn't that to start with. I wasn't raised that way, although I wasn't raised anyway, really. At 12 years old, I was an usher in a church, grew up in a church. Well, like I said, when I seen Queelan there with his head chopped all to pieces, I thought, there but by the grace of God was me. And I felt guilty because they were all laying there dead. And I think I could have got some of them out. Because I knew what to do. I might have not got any out. I mean, it might have just been overwhelming, but I felt like I had deserted them. That's a hurting part because it's really something you can't get over. I go to bed at night, and it's been happening all my life. I fall out of the bed, I'm fighting. I've got my bed way down close to the floor. I don't even sleep in my wife's bedroom because her bed is up high. When I fall out, I'm kicking, I'm screaming, I do all these things. You use that term, the 1,000-mile stare. I've seen too much of it. Wouldn't say I was a coward, but I was no more than anybody else. Go hide somewhere, wasn't no way. It was one of them things where you had to do it. So your fears become mad. I ain't afraid no more. I'm mad. How did my life go or my family's life go when I come home? Same as it always was. I was supposed to go through all that, come home, pick up from where I left, the same old thing. And it don't work. It's there. I was a different person. I was mean.
It changed the trajectory of your life.
Absolutely. Every man, I believe, goes into the military to some degree. When they come home, the military has fashioned what you're going to be. I didn't like what I was. I come home with seeing a psychiatrist up here in Salisbury 3 days a week. And of course, she was good. She told me, she said, well, I've got another man that was in the Drang Valley. Well, he lives about 30 miles from you here. I said, would you like to get in touch with him? I started going down there. My wife likes to go to yard sales, and he was always going to yard sales. And so we started going down there. 6 months after she gave me his address, his sister called me, and his name was Tom, and said, Robert, Tom's dead. I said, well, what happened? She said he was sitting on his bed. He had his 38. He fired 3 times in the ceiling and 1 time in his head, in which things like that, it went through my mind thousands of times. For some reason, I didn't really have the guts to do it to myself. But I just didn't want to be here any longer. It's hard. One of the hardest things I've ever tried to do is to be normal. The degree of temperature in a day's time, I've covered with blood, none of it my own. It's got a smell. When it gets so many hours, it starts stinking. What I smelled was hot blood. I mean, I've worked at places where they were running Dacron and stuff like that, and you come across something that smelled just like hot blood. There's things you see, things you hear, smell. It's just overwhelming because it's there. It's something you have to live with. But there's a brighter side. Everybody kept trying to get me to get in church. Yeah, I'll be there next week. But I never made it. Finally decided to humor them. And I went, preacher preached. He didn't preach to nobody else, he preached to me, single me out, holding on to the back of the pew like I almost lift up the pew. When it came time, I let go of the pew and I went forward. And I gave my life to the Lord and I never backed up. I dealt with reality. Vietnam, that was reality. Being saved was reality. You can beat me over the head with a 2x4 if you want to. I'm not going to deny God. It's real. That's the only thing that's helped me out 100%. It kept me from doing what Tom did. How did the people around me change? They didn't. I couldn't come in and take up where I left off. I got accused of being a royal SOB. I got 100% total and permanent disability from Vietnam, eat up with PTSD, Agent Orange. That's been my life ever since. I love music, and that's how I got in touch with Elvis. Not the Elvis, but the Elvis. He listened to my song. I guess you've heard it, The One Who Waits.
Throughout the years, many songs have been written, intending to memorialize our sons and daughters who fight to keep our nation free. But there's another who wears no uniform or parades no medal, but with equal courage, just as great, the unsung hero. She's the one who waits. The one who waits stays up late, counts the day he's been away, crying tears, gaining years upon the face of the one who waits. She's a soldier in a way, much more than I can say, to smile and still go on, but feel so all alone. She'll hang her head and pray and push bad thoughts away, like an actress in a play. The one who waits. Sleepless night, tear-stained pillow, memory of yesterday. She knows full well might take a miracle, but until then she'll have to wait. She can't understand this war or what they're fighting for, and so she walks
How old were you when you went to church that first time?
It wasn't that long because I couldn't have made it much longer.
So you're still in your 20s?
Well, there's some things you can tell that trying to figure out, there's 7 years difference between my wife's age and my age. Well, if it's all figured up, she was 14 years old when we got married. We had to go to South Carolina to get married. I went down to get our license, said, well, she can't get married, here. I said, why not? Said, she's just not old enough. And the only way you get married here is for her to be pregnant. Well, I said, she's pregnant, but that was a lie. Said, well, you got to have a doctor's. And so I knew I couldn't get that. So we took off. I didn't even have enough money to get gas to get to South Carolina. But her mama paid for all the gas. Her mom and daddy, they all went with us. I can't talk about what went on there in X-ray. I held up pretty good.
Your path after you got out of Vietnam was not a normal path. You went to church. Where did the church lead you?
The idea it's not a normal path. No, sir. Ain't no fool in his right mind gonna get out there and run up and down in the middle of a battlefield.
But you had a couple of outlets, and one of them was the church. You became a pastor. And the other one was you're a songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And those are outlets from your inner emotions. Do you think you could have written those songs without first going to Vietnam and experiencing what you did?
No. I've got a whole lot of songs. I've got one, I say, this is my story of my life. It's short, but I wrote a story of my life. And let me just quote it to you here so you can listen.
Mama and Daddy went separate ways. They seemed so unhappy back in those days. But a good job was waiting when I turned 16. And a great big world that I'd never seen. So I couldn't wait to be on my own. But I know I'd done different had I only known that the world I'm now living in is moving much faster than time. And if we can't keep up with it, the world will just leave us behind.
But like I say, it's the story of my life. Short version. The one who wait was a little black boy who bunked right beside of me in Vietnam. Wasn't quite a month after the Drang Valley that the 101st got kicked pretty hard. And so we were going out the next morning to take the troops out to make an assault, but we had left that evening to get ready. A fellow named Gorilla was crew chief, and Rice was a little black boy that bunked beside of me. He had 2 little girls. I think one was 3 and one was 4. He loved to show the pictures of them. They had sent one ship back, and that was Gorillas, and he went back to the company area to have hot coffee before they made the assault. Well, the ship never did make it. It was shot down. I think it's 40-some years after his ship was shot down that they finally found a Vietnamese soldier who said he had shot down a helicopter in that area. I didn't have to learn nothing. I hung around with people who knew. Just like I could play the guitar, but they didn't want me to play guitar. All they wanted me for was singing. My message is this. A lot of churches you go to, you got so many preachers nowadays, and everything is love, love, love. They tell you today you have to forgive everybody. If you don't forgive, that God will not forgive you. Reality is reading what it says and believing what it says and not putting your thoughts in it. Love, that comes from getting your heart right with God.
You were saved in Vietnam for your work after Vietnam.
I saved after Vietnam.
You were saved from death in Vietnam. God
Yeah.
saved you
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
because He had another plan for you. You couldn't see it at the time.
The bottom line is that we're living in a world of reality. But knowing what I knew in Vietnam, the simple fact we were in Vietnam and all those guys dying You can't imagine what it's like to hear grown men crying and screaming, picking them up and their legs just hanging. In the United States, they had to have a training field. That's reality.
It seems like this is my interview, but this is yours. This is your
Yeah.
story. And I really, truly, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for telling your story. And you are a legend.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Crying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And many men have took their stand in a place where the fire has passed, and stood in sun. We're going home at last. I believe the Holy Bible is leading me.
If you are a veteran, or if you know someone who is, I urge you to share your story. Whether you fought in battle or worked behind the scenes, your experience matters. It's not just history, it's our history. It's a history we cannot afford to lose. At Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel, we are committed to preserving these stories, but we need your help. Subscribe and share it with your friends and family. And most importantly, if you have a story to tell, reach out to us on social media or email. Both are listed in our description. Every veteran story deserves to be heard, remembered, and honored. So join us in this journey. Together, we can ensure that the legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel live on. This is Diana Mall Halstead, the Kriegie's daughter, signing off. Thank you for listening, and to all veterans, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service and your sacrifice. If you would like to purchase a copy of my dad's memoir, Writings from the Barbed Wire Hotel, click the link in the description. In the back of almost 800 pages is an index of all the sources I used to research my dad's military career and time as a prisoner of war. Let's spread the word and keep these stories alive. And remember, every story matters, especially yours. Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel was written by and produced by Diana Mall Halstead, the Kriegie's daughter. Until next time, this is Legends of the Barbed Wire Hotel. Stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the sacrifices made for our freedom. Thanks for listening.